The notification sound from Zara's phone cut through the silence of our empty house like a knife through butter. She'd left it on the kitchen counter again, rushing off to another important client meeting that would keep her out until midnight. The screen lit up with a message from MT, and my world shifted on its axis. I'm Hayes Rellin, 38 years old, IT security consultant with 15 years of military experience behind me. I fix problems for a living, both digital and mechanical. What I don't fix, apparently, is marriages. The phone buzzed again, then again. My coffee grew cold as I stared at the device, knowing I shouldn't look, but unable to stop myself. After 12 years of marriage and 2 daughters, you'd think I'd have earned some basic respect. You'd be wrong. I picked up the phone. No password. Zara never bothered with security, which always drove me crazy in my line of work. The messages from MT filled the screen like poison spreading through clean water. Can't wait to have you all to myself tonight. Hayes suspects nothing, right? The divorce papers are ready. My lawyer says we can clean him out if we play this smart. Once Alara's out of the picture, we'll have everything. The company, the money, freedom. MT had to be Marlo Trasker, Zara's boss at the consulting firm. The same Marlo who'd been coming to our barbecues for 3 years, shaking my hand, drinking my beer, playing with my daughters. The same Marlo whose wife, Alara, had become something of a friend, always asking about my workshop projects with genuine interest. I scrolled through weeks of messages, each one making my stomach tighter. They weren't just planning to destroy my marriage. They were scheming to ruin Marlo's wife, too, manipulate company resources, and leave me holding an empty bag while they rode off into their perfect sunset. The really twisted part? They thought I was too stupid to figure it out. I've spent my career finding security holes that others miss, tracking down digital footprints that criminals think they've erased. I've dismantled improvised explosive devices in places where one wrong move meant game over. But somehow, my own wife figured I'd never notice her affair playing out right under my nose. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. I connected Zara's phone to my laptop and started copying everything. Messages, photos, email attachments, location data. All of it went onto an encrypted drive. The digital trail painted a picture that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Financial documents, company passwords shared inappropriately, even discussions about how to manipulate HR policies to their advantage. My hands stayed steady as I worked, muscle memory from years of handling delicate operations under pressure. But inside, something cold and calculating was taking shape. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. Let's see how they handled someone who actually knew the rules. The front door slammed shut around 11:30. Zara's heels clicked across the hardwood floor, each step announcing her return from another client dinner. I'd already put her phone back exactly where she'd left it and settled into my chair with a book, looking like the oblivious husband she thought she'd married. "How was your meeting?" I asked without looking up. "Exhausting. Marlo's really pushing everyone hard on the new accounts." She didn't even have the grace to sound guilty. "I'm going straight to bed." "Sweet dreams," I said, turning a page. "Hope tomorrow's more relaxing for you." She paused at the bottom of the stairs. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something honest. Instead, she just headed upstairs, probably already planning her next move in whatever game she thought she was winning. I waited until I heard the shower running, then went down to my workshop in the basement. The space was my sanctuary. Workbenches lined with tools, computer equipment, half-finished projects that actually meant something to me. Everything organized, everything purposeful, everything honest. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I fired up my secure computer and started digging deeper into Marlo Trasker's digital footprint. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look and have the right skills. Public records, business filings, social media posts he thought he'd deleted, all of it painting a picture of a man who'd made cheating and manipulation into an art form. But here's what Marlowe didn't know about me. I don't just find problems, I solve them. Permanently. The company party was this Friday at Trasker Hall, some fancy venue downtown that Marlowe had rented to celebrate the firm's latest big contract. Everyone would be there. Employees, spouses, clients, the whole social circle that Zara cared so much about impressing. Perfect. I spent the next 3 hours planning, cross-referencing, and preparing. By the time I finally headed to bed, I had a strategy that would have made my old commanding officer proud. Thorough, logical, and devastating. Zara was already asleep, or pretending to be. I slipped under the covers and stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. 12 years of marriage, and I was sharing a bed with a stranger who thought I was too stupid to see what she was doing. She was about to discover just how observant I could be. Friday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel sharp and clear. I'd spent the week making preparations, each step carefully planned and executed. The encrypted drive with all of Zara's messages was safely copied in 3 separate locations. I'd also done some additional research into Marlowe's business practices that would make for interesting conversation later. Zara emerged from our bedroom wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, probably bought for Marlowe's benefit. She looked stunning, which made the whole situation that much more bitter. After 12 years, she was still putting effort into her appearance, just not for me. "You look beautiful," I said, straightening my tie. I'd chosen my best suit for tonight's performance. "Thank you." She didn't meet my eyes. "Ready to go?" The drive to Trasker Hall passed in comfortable silence. Well, comfortable for her. I was running through my mental checklist, making sure every detail was in place. Zara spent the time checking her phone, probably coordinating with her lover about their evening plans. Trasker Hall turned out to be one of those restored Victorian mansions that rich people rent for events where they want to impress other rich people. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters in bow ties carrying champagne on silver trays. The whole place screamed money and status, exactly the kind of environment where Zara felt most at home. We made our entrance fashionably late, just as Marlowe was finishing his welcome speech to the assembled crowd. He stood at the front of the main ballroom, tall and confident in his expensive tuxedo, playing the role of successful CEO to perfection. His wife Alara stood beside him, elegant in a simple black dress, smiling at appropriate moments, but looking somewhat distant. "And I want to thank all of our dedicated employees," Marlowe was saying, "especially those who've gone above and beyond this year, putting in extra hours and extra effort to make our recent successes possible." His eyes found Zara in the crowd and lingered just a moment too long. She gave him a smile that she hadn't given me in months. "Some people truly understand what it means to be committed to excellence," Marlowe continued, still looking at my wife. "They deserve partners who appreciate their dedication and ambition." The comment was clearly directed at me, and several people in the crowd seemed to pick up on the subtext. I felt their eyes shifting between Marlowe, Zara, and me, waiting to see how I'd react to what was essentially a public insult. This was my moment. I raised my champagne glass and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You're absolutely right, Marlowe. People do deserve partners who appreciate them. I told your wife the exact same thing yesterday, on our date." The ballroom didn't go silent. That only happens in movies. Instead, conversations faltered and resumed in a different key, with people pretending they hadn't heard while hanging on every word. Marlowe's face went through several interesting color changes, settling on a shade somewhere between pale and furious. Alara, however, looked directly at me with something that might have been approval or amusement. Hard to tell with someone that composed. Zara grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Hayes, what are you doing?" "Making conversation," I said mildly. "Isn't that what we do at parties?" Marlowe had recovered enough to force a laugh. "Always the joker, Hayes, though I'm not sure Alara would appreciate being the subject of your humor." "Oh, I don't think she minded," I replied. "We had a very honest discussion about marriage and commitment, didn't we, Alara?" All eyes turned to Marlowe's wife. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all evening. "Indeed we did," she said. "Hayes has some very interesting perspectives on loyalty and trust in relationships." Now Marlowe looked genuinely worried. He tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted, and in a social circle like this one, seeds grew fast. Zara pulled me aside as soon as she could manage it without causing more of a scene. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed. "What's this about a date with Alara?" "Just a friendly coffee yesterday afternoon," I said. "We had a lot to talk about. You should check your email when you get a chance, by the way." Her face went white. "What email?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the draft message I'd prepared, all of her romantic texts with Marlowe, formatted into a nice, neat document and addressed to HR, the company board, and about half the people in this room. "I haven't sent it yet," I said conversationally, "but the evening's still young." For the first time in months, I had Zara's complete attention. "Hayes, you can't. This would ruin everything." "Everything for who?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, everything's been ruined for quite a while now. I'm just making sure everyone else knows it too." She looked around the ballroom, probably calculating how many careers and reputations would go up in flames if I followed through on my threat. "What do you want?" "Right now? I want to enjoy the party. Your boss threw such a nice event, it would be rude not to appreciate all his hard work." I walked away, leaving her standing by the champagne fountain with her mouth open and her carefully laid plans crumbling around her feet. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of tense conversations and meaningful glances. Marlowe kept trying to corner me for a private discussion, but I made sure to stay in public spaces surrounded by witnesses. Alara and I had another brief chat near the dessert table, where she mentioned that she'd be filing some important paperwork on Monday morning. "Divorce papers," she clarified quietly. "I've suspected for months, but yesterday's conversation confirmed everything I needed to know." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. Some situations require decisive action." She looked across the room at her husband, who was currently trying to calm down my increasingly frantic wife. "I believe you understand that better than most." I did indeed. The weekend passed in a strange, suspended kind of quiet. Zara barely spoke to me, spending most of her time on hushed phone calls with Marlowe, trying to figure out how to contain the situation they'd created. I used the time productively, making additional copies of all my evidence and researching the company's HR policies regarding workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. Monday morning brought the first real consequences. I was in my home office, working on a security audit for one of my clients, when Zara burst through the door without knocking. "They've suspended me," she said, waving a letter from the company. "Pending investigation into inappropriate workplace conduct and possible misuse of confidential information." "That's unfortunate," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen, though not entirely surprising given the circumstances. "This is your fault. You and whatever lies you told Alara." I finally turned to face her. I didn't tell Alara anything she didn't already know or suspect. I just confirmed what she'd already figured out on her own. "You're destroying my career over nothing." "Over nothing?" I pulled up the folder of screenshots I'd taken from her phone. "Would you like me to read some of these messages aloud? The ones where you and Marlowe discuss the best way to manipulate me into a divorce settlement. Or maybe the ones where you share confidential client information that you had no business accessing? Zara's face went through the same color changes I'd seen from Marlowe at the party. You went through my phone. You left it unlocked on the kitchen counter, multiple times. If you're going to have an affair, at least learn basic operational security. She sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, uncertain, vulnerable, human. Then the mask slipped back into place. What do you want, Hayes? Money? The house? I'll give you whatever you're asking for if you just make this go away. I want you to understand something, I said, leaning back in my chair. This isn't about money or property or even the affair itself. This is about respect. For 12 years, I've been a good husband, a good father, a good provider. I've supported your career, your ambitions, your dreams, and in return, you decided I was too stupid to notice when you started planning to destroy my life. I never meant— Yes, you did. You meant every word of those messages. You meant every lie, every manipulation, every moment you looked me in the eye and pretended to be the woman I married. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where we'd built what I thought was a life together. The suspension is just the beginning, I continued. HR is going to find evidence of policy violations, conflicts of interest, and misuse of company resources. Marlowe's going to discover that his wife has been documenting his affairs for months and that she's hired a very good lawyer. And you're going to learn what it feels like when someone you trusted decides you're not worth basic honesty. You can't do this to us. I turned back to face her. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply making sure that the consequences of your choices become visible to the people who need to know about them. My phone rang before she could respond. The caller ID showed Finn Morrison, my best friend and former military colleague who now ran security at a local bar called the Blue Lamp. Hayes, you need to hear this, Finn said without preamble. Your wife's boss was in here Saturday night getting drunk and running his mouth about some situation at work. Apparently, he's got bigger problems than just an angry spouse. Such as some very creative accounting practices and a few clients who are asking uncomfortable questions about where their money went. Word is that the company's about to be audited, and not the friendly kind. I looked at Zara, who was trying to listen to my side of the conversation. Interesting timing. Gets better. He was also talking about how he was going to make some IT consultant pay for ruining his life. I'm assuming he meant you. Probably a safe assumption. Watch yourself, Hayes. Guys seem pretty wound up, and desperate people do stupid things. After I hung up, Zara stared at me with something approaching panic. What was that about? Sounds like Marlowe's having a rough week too. Apparently cheating on his wife wasn't his only questionable decision. Hayes, if the company goes under, I'll lose everything. My career, my reputation. You lost those the moment you decided to betray the people who trusted you, I interrupted. The company investigation is just making it official. She left my office without another word, probably to call Marlowe and compare notes on how badly their perfect plan was falling apart. I went back to my work, but part of my attention was on the larger game still playing out. Finn's warning about Marlowe was worth taking seriously. Desperate people do indeed do stupid things, and I needed to be ready for whatever stupid thing Marlowe might try next. The afternoon brought another interesting development. Ilara called asking if I'd like to meet for coffee again. I have some updates on the situation, she said, and I think you'll find them educational. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from the suburban gossip network that was probably already buzzing with speculation about Friday night's party. Marlowe tried to clean out our joint accounts over the weekend, Ilara said without preamble. Fortunately, I'd already moved most of the assets to accounts he doesn't have access to. Smart planning. I've been planning for months. Your wife wasn't his first affair, just his most recent. I've been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a folder full of financial records, photographs, and what looked like surveillance reports. Private investigator? I asked. 2 of them, actually, plus a forensic accountant who's very good at following money trails. She closed the tablet and looked at me directly. Your revelation at the party gave me the perfect opportunity to move forward with everything. Happy to help. There's more. The company audit your friend mentioned, I may have provided some anonymous tips to the right people about which records they should examine most carefully. I had to admire her thoroughness. Sounds like Marlowe's going to have a very educational week. He's going to have an educational rest of his life, she corrected. By the time my lawyers and the federal investigators finish with him, he'll be lucky to find work managing a coffee shop. We talked for another hour, comparing notes and coordinating our respective approaches to the situation. It turned out that Alara had been just as methodical in her planning as I'd been in mine, but with the advantage of more time and better resources. What about Zara? She asked as we prepared to leave. What about her? Are you planning to destroy her as completely as we're destroying Marlowe? I considered the question. I'm planning to make sure she faces the consequences of her choices. Whether that destroys her depends on how she handles those consequences. That's very philosophical of you. I'm a practical man. Revenge is satisfying, but it's also a lot of work. I'd rather focus my energy on building something new than tearing down something that was already broken. Alara smiled. You're more generous than I am. I want Marlowe to suffer for every lie he told and every person he hurt. Different situations call for different approaches, I said, but I think we both understand the importance of seeing things through to the end. Indeed we do. As I drove home, I reflected on how much the situation had changed in just a few days. What started as a simple case of marital infidelity had evolved into something much larger and more complex. Zara and Marlowe had thought they were playing a game with just the 4 of us, 2 cheaters and 2 victims. They were about to learn that they'd actually been playing against opponents who understood the rules much better than they did. The real game was just getting started. Tuesday brought the first signs that Marlowe was ready to escalate beyond passive damage control. I was leaving a client meeting downtown when I spotted him waiting by my truck in the parking garage. He looked like he hadn't slept much, and his usually perfect appearance was showing cracks around the edges. We need to talk, he said as I approached. I'm listening. This has gone far enough. Whatever game you think you're playing, it's time to stop before people get hurt. I unlocked my truck but didn't get in. People are already hurt, Marlowe. The question is whether they deserved it. Zara loves you. This thing between us, it was just a mistake. We can fix this if you stop trying to destroy everything. Zara loves the idea of being married to someone successful and stable while having affairs with someone exciting and dangerous. Unfortunately for her, I'm not interested in playing that role anymore. Marlowe stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. It might have worked on someone who hadn't spent years dealing with actual dangerous people in actual dangerous situations. You don't understand what you're messing with, he said. I have resources, connections. I can make your life very difficult if you keep pushing this. You mean more difficult than discovering that my wife has been planning to divorce me and take half my assets to fund her new life with her boss? I asked. More difficult than finding out that the man I've been welcoming into my home has been laughing at me behind my back for months? That's not how it was. That's exactly how it was. I've read the messages, Marlowe. All of them. His face went pale. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You decided to make my personal life your business, so now your personal life is my business. You involved my family in your schemes, so now your family is involved in the consequences. Leave Alara out of this. I didn't bring Alara into this. You did, the moment you decided to cheat on her with my wife. She's making her own choices about how to respond to your betrayal, just like I'm making mine. Marlowe looked around the parking garage, probably checking to see if anyone else was around. The place was mostly empty at this time of day, just concrete pillars and shadows. "This can all go away," he said. "The investigation, the audit, all of it. I have people who owe me favors." "Maybe. But you don't have people who owe Alara favors, and you definitely don't have people who can make federal investigators forget about financial irregularities once they've been reported." "Federal investigators?" I smiled. "You really should be more careful about which accounts you use for personal expenses and which clients you overcharge to cover your lifestyle costs. Forensic accountants are very good at following money trails these days." The color drained completely from his face. "You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to point the right people in the right direction and let them do their jobs." I got into my truck and started the engine. Marlowe stood there looking like a man who'd just realized he was standing in quicksand. "This isn't over," he called through the window. "You're right," I replied. "It's not." I drove home thinking about the conversation and what it revealed about Marlowe's state of mind. Desperate, angry, and starting to realize that his usual tools of manipulation and intimidation weren't going to work on this problem. That made him unpredictable, which made him dangerous. Zara was waiting for me when I got home, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. "Marlowe called me," she said. "He thinks you're trying to frame him for financial crimes." "I'm not trying to frame anyone for anything. I'm just making sure that people who need to know about certain activities have access to the right information." "What information?" I sat down in my chair and looked at her. Really looked at her, trying to see past the anger and panic to whatever was left of the woman I'd married. "Did you know about the money, Zara?" "What money?" "The client accounts that Marlowe's been skimming, the expense reports he's been padding, the contracts he's been manipulating to increase his commissions." Her expression told me everything I needed to know. "I never asked him about his business practices." "But you knew something was wrong." "I knew he lived well for someone on a CEO salary, but I figured he had family money or investments or something." "And you didn't care enough to ask questions because it wasn't your problem." "It's not my problem. I work in client services, not accounting." "It became your problem when you started planning a future with someone who funds his lifestyle through fraud. It became your problem when you used company resources to coordinate your affair. And it became your problem when you decided that I was too stupid to notice what you were doing." She sat down on the couch across from me, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said quietly. "How far did you mean for it to go?" "I don't know. I was unhappy, and Marlowe made me feel important, valued. Things with us have been difficult for so long. Things with us have been difficult because you stopped being present in our marriage. You stopped talking to me, stopped including me in your decisions, stopped acting like we were partners in anything that mattered to you. You're always working, always focused on your projects and your clients. When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything other than schedules and bills?" She had a point, which made the whole situation more complicated than I wanted it to be. "When was the last time you tried to have a real conversation with me? When was the last time you asked about my work or showed interest in anything I cared about?" We stared at each other across the space that had grown between us over the years, two people who'd somehow become strangers while living in the same house. "It doesn't matter now," I said finally. "We're past the point where talking can fix what's broken." "It doesn't have to be. We could try counseling or—" "Zara, you've been planning to divorce me for months. You've been sharing intimate details of our marriage with your lover. You've been lying to my face every day while plotting to take half of everything I've worked for. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal. So what happens now? Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. The company investigation will run its course. The federal audit will determine whether any crimes were committed. Alara will proceed with her divorce and her asset protection strategy, and you and I will figure out how to end our marriage with as little additional damage as possible. And Marlowe? Marlowe will discover that actions have consequences, just like everyone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the conversation with Zara and the confrontation with Marlo, trying to figure out what their next moves might be. Desperate people do stupid things, and both of them were getting more desperate by the day. Around midnight, I heard a car door slam outside. I looked through the bedroom window and saw Marlo's Mercedes parked across the street. He was just sitting there, staring at our house. I watched for 20 minutes before he finally drove away. Whatever he was planning, it was escalating beyond verbal threats and attempts at intimidation. I made a mental note to call Finn in the morning. If Marlo wanted to play games with surveillance and intimidation, he was about to learn that I had friends who were much better at those games than he was. The real confrontation was still coming, and I wanted to be ready for it. Wednesday morning brought news that changed everything. Ilara called while I was having coffee, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They arrested Marlo an hour ago," she said. "Federal agents, at his office, in front of everyone." The financial investigation moved faster than expected. It moved exactly as fast as I wanted it to. I provided them with additional evidence yesterday. Documents that Marlo thought he'd destroyed, account records that he didn't know I'd copied, communications that paint a very clear picture of systematic fraud. I had to admire her thoroughness. How much trouble is he in? Enough that he won't be bothering anyone for a very long time? Wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. The federal prosecutors are calling it one of the clearest cases they've seen in years. And the company? Will probably survive once they clean house and bring in new management. Most of the employees had nothing to do with Marlo's schemes. Including Zara? That depends on what the investigation reveals about her level of involvement. Using company resources for personal business is a fireable offense, but probably not a criminal one unless they can prove she knew about the financial irregularities. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about how quickly everything had unraveled. A week ago, Zara and Marlo thought they had the perfect plan to get everything they wanted while leaving their spouses with nothing. Now Marlo was in federal custody, Zara was suspended pending investigation, and their entire world was collapsing. The front door opened and Zara walked in, looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "They arrested him," she said, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. "I heard. The FBI came to the office. They took computers, files, everything. They asked me questions about my relationship with Marlo and whether I knew about any financial irregularities." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we were having an affair, but that I didn't know anything about his business practices." "Good. Lying to federal agents is a serious crime." She looked at me with something that might have been hope. "Does this change anything? Between us, I mean?" "It changes the circumstances, but not the fundamental problem. You still betrayed our marriage. You still plan to destroy my life for your own benefit. The fact that your partner turned out to be a criminal doesn't erase what you did. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to pay a bill or missing an anniversary. What you did was make calculated decisions over a period of months to deceive and manipulate me. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." My phone rang before she could respond. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hayes Rellin? This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. We'd like to speak with you about your relationship with Marlo Trasker and any information you might have regarding his business activities. I'm available whenever you need me. Would this afternoon work? We're particularly interested in any communications or documents that might be relevant to our investigation. I have quite a bit of material that might be helpful." After I hung up, Zara stared at me with growing understanding. "You're going to help them prosecute Marlo." "I'm going to provide them with information that's relevant to their investigation. What they do with that information is up to them." "Information about me, too?" "Information about everyone involved in the situation. The agents will determine what's relevant to their case." She put her head in her hands. "My career is over." "Your career in corporate consulting is probably over." That doesn't mean your life is over, just that you'll need to make different choices about your future. Easy for you to say. You have your own business, your own clients. I have nothing without the company. You have skills, experience, and the opportunity to start fresh somewhere else. What you don't have is the right to expect me to help you rebuild what you chose to tear down. The FBI interview that afternoon was thorough but straightforward. Agent Martinez and her partner were professional and focused, asking specific questions about the timeline of events, the evidence I'd gathered, and my knowledge of Marlowe's activities. I provided them with copies of all the communications between Zara and Marlowe, including the messages that discussed company business and client information. I also shared my observations about Marlowe's lifestyle and spending patterns, which seemed inconsistent with his legitimate income. "This is very helpful," Agent Martinez said, reviewing the documents I'd provided. "Did you suspect financial irregularities before you discovered the affair?" I suspected something was wrong with Marlowe's situation, but I focused on the personal betrayal rather than investigating his business practices. That was Mrs. Trasker's area of expertise. "We've spoken with Mrs. Trasker. She's been very cooperative. She's a thorough person. If she decided to document her husband's activities, I'm sure she did a comprehensive job." The agents spent another hour going through details and asking follow-up questions. By the time they left, I had the impression that their case against Marlowe was solid and that Zara's involvement was limited to policy violations rather than criminal activity. That evening, I found Zara packing clothes into suitcases in our bedroom. "Where are you going?" "My sister's house in Denver. I need time to think about what comes next, and I can't do that here." "Probably a good idea." She stopped packing and looked at me. "I'm sorry, Hayes, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." "I appreciate that. Do you think we'll ever be able to be friends again? After the divorce? After everything settles down?" I considered the question seriously. "I don't know. Right now, I'm angry and hurt and tired of dealing with the mess that your choices created. Maybe someday that will change, but it's going to take time." "I understand." She finished packing and loaded her car while I watched from the kitchen window. 12 years of marriage, and it was ending with suitcases and awkward conversations about maybe being friends someday. After she left, I went down to my workshop and started organizing my tools. The space felt different now, quieter, but also more focused. For the first time in months, I could think clearly about what I wanted to do next. My phone buzzed with a text from Alara. "Heard Zara left town. How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Better than expected," ready to move forward. "Good. I'm having a small celebration tomorrow night. Just a few friends, nothing fancy. You're welcome to join if you're interested." "What are we celebrating?" "New beginnings." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." The next morning brought a call from Vara Rovell, the HR director at Zara's company. "Mr. Rellin, I wanted to update you on the status of our investigation. We've concluded that your wife violated several company policies regarding workplace relationships and use of company resources, but we found no evidence of involvement in the financial irregularities that led to Mr. Trasker's arrest." "What does that mean for her employment status?" "She's been terminated for policy violations, but we won't be pursuing criminal charges or civil action. Her final paycheck and benefits information will be mailed to your address." "Thank you for the update. I also wanted to say that we appreciate your cooperation during this difficult situation. Your professionalism made a challenging process much easier for everyone involved." After I hung up, I realized that the immediate crisis was essentially over. Marlowe was in federal custody facing serious charges. Zara had lost her job, but avoided criminal prosecution. The company was cleaning house and moving forward under new management. Everyone was dealing with the consequences of their choices. That afternoon, I drove to the Blue Lamp to update Finn on the situation and buy him a beer for his help with intelligence gathering. "So it's over?" he asked, sliding a bottle across the bar. The dramatic part is over. The divorce will take months to finalize, and Marlowe's trial won't happen for at least a year, but the immediate situation is resolved. How do you feel about it? I thought about the question while I sipped my beer. Satisfied, I guess. Not happy. Too much damage was done for anyone to be happy about the outcome, but satisfied that people faced appropriate consequences for their actions. And Zara? Zara's learning that choices have consequences. She'll figure out how to rebuild her life, just like I'm figuring out how to rebuild mine. Speaking of rebuilding, what's next for you? I'm thinking about expanding the business, maybe taking on some bigger contracts. I've got time and energy now that I'm not dealing with a marriage that was falling apart. Sounds like a plan. That evening, I went to Alara's celebration. It was indeed a small gathering, maybe a dozen people in the elegant living room of her downtown apartment. Good wine, interesting conversation, and the kind of atmosphere that comes from people who've survived difficult situations and come out stronger. "Thank you for coming," Alara said, finding me by the window that overlooked the city lights. "Thank you for inviting me. This is nice. It feels good to have something to celebrate after everything that's happened." "New beginnings, like you said." "Exactly." She raised her wine glass. "To moving forward." "To moving forward," I agreed, touching my glass to hers. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Alara and I found ourselves alone on her balcony, looking out over the city that had been the backdrop for so much drama over the past few weeks. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About how things ended?" "No." "About how they began?" "Plenty. But regrets don't change anything, they just keep you stuck in the past." Very philosophical, very practical. I've got a life to rebuild and a business to grow. That requires looking forward, not backward. I feel the same way. For the first time in years, I'm excited about the future instead of dreading it. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, two people who'd been through something difficult and come out the other side with a better understanding of who they were and what they wanted. "Well," I said finally, "I should let you get some rest. Thank you again for everything. Thank you for being brave enough to act when action was needed. Not everyone would have handled the situation with such precision." I smiled. I told you I was good at solving problems." "Indeed you are." As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I reflected on how much had changed in just 2 weeks. The house would feel empty for a while, and there would be legal paperwork and financial arrangements to sort out. But the immediate crisis was over. Zara and Marlowe had thought they were smart enough to manipulate everyone around them without consequences. They'd learned otherwise, and now they were dealing with the results of their choices. I was dealing with the results of my choices too, but I was comfortable with the decisions I'd made. Sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing to do, and sometimes solving a problem requires accepting that some things can't be fixed, only ended. The house was dark and quiet when I got home, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. For the first time in months, I could sleep without wondering what lies I'd discover tomorrow, or what new betrayal was being planned while I wasn't paying attention. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight, I was satisfied with a job well done. The game was over, and the right people had won.